And without any further ado, we're going to show off the first company in that founder spotlight, which is Capsule. So if we could just cue that video.
The problem Capsule solves is that the pharmacy is completely broken for everybody that has to interact with it. And that's everybody from me and you and everybody out there that needs to go to the pharmacy every month to get their medications, to our doctors who prescribe, to pharmacies multiple times a day, to the insurance companies who pay for medications, and the drug companies who make all these novel therapies. The pharmacy is the center of all of it, and it's completely not working for anybody. We've taken all of the familiar frustrations of the pharmacy, the waiting, the out of stocks, the lack of information, the inability to access information privately, and we've completely made that experience completely digital. It lives in your phone, and it's the easiest thing, it's the easiest pharmacy that you could use. One of the most important things that we've done is by getting rid of all of the aisles and aisles of things that aren't related to your health, the candy bars, the cigarettes, the Cheetos, all of the things that we would invest in retail stores, and we've invested that in building that technology platform that enables data to go back and forth between all of these parties to deliver, just to deliver better care and to create value for kind of everybody in the ecosystem. What we found is that the average person interacts with Capsule about 6 times more than they would interact with a traditional pharmacy. And I think that's really the thing we're seeing with engagement with the brand and the way we've built the chat, the text, the email, is that people are wanting to engage with their pharmacists. And by reducing the friction of doing that, people are doing that a lot more often. We've identified this incredibly complex, opaque, kind of corrupt, archaic system. And every day we keep building and we keep looking, and we see windows, not walls, as we get deeper into the business. And everywhere we look, we see so much opportunity to fix things for everybody in the ecosystem. And so the biggest challenge is for us is just sequentially executing on everything and kind of saying, we're going to get to everything, we're going to completely rebuild this, but one step at a time.
Okay, please welcome Eric Kinariwala to the stage, the founder of Capsule. There he is.
Hi.
Hey, bud. We're really close in these stools, so get ready for some intimacy. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. I wanted to start with, like, you know, your past life before Capsule. You worked at Bain, right? You're an investor. At what point, or what was the moment that you decided, like, no more of this, I'm going to build Capsule? How did that happen?
Yeah. So I was living in London in 2012, and I moved back to New York after being gone for 5 or 6 years. And I'd spent a lot of time as an investor looking at retail companies, looking at healthcare companies, looking at tech companies. And when I moved back to New York, there were these 2 big ideas that have been super interesting to me. One was this idea that local retail and local commerce is going away, and all of the stuff's going to live on your phone. And the other was around the massive shift in healthcare and the way the world is going away from volume and really focused on the value of the care that's being provided. And so anyway, 2 big ideas, and I find myself in the basement of a Lower East Side pharmacy.
So wait, when you came back to New York, is this after you had left your job, or you're still working as a investor?
So I've left my job. I've finally kind of woken up and kind of, I think, kind of listened to that feeling of,
I have an idea,
yeah,
or some idea of an idea.
I have an idea of an idea. I have some things I'm interested in, and they're not what I'm doing every day when I'm waking up in the morning, and life's a little short to do that for too many days. So I quit my job, bought a one-way ticket back to New York, lived in Williamsburg with a suitcase, kind of bumming around for a year, and had these 2 big ideas, these 2 big themes in my head, and I think didn't know what to do with them, and then I had this, like, viscerally negative experience in the pharmacy, and I'm in the basement, and, you know, my head is throbbing, and I'm waiting in line, and I finally get to the counter, and they don't have my medication in stock, and there's no cell phone service, and I can't call my doctor, and my phone has died because I've been on it for the hour I've been waiting in line. And so I end up going home, and I wake up the next day, and I sort of immediately
You didn't get your
realized-
medicine.
Didn't get my medicine.
Just gave up.
I just completely gave up. Completely frustrating, and just kind of immediately realized like that was the thing that tied those two big ideas together, was the pharmacy. And so I always kind of say like your head and your heart have to align to kind of take that leap to start something where the business has to like intellectually make sense to you, and it has to be a good business and a good business model, but you have to like just personally feel the pain of what the problem is to really have the conviction to, to really take that plunge. And I think when those two things balance out, you have a shot at being successful, but too much of one or the other, and I think it's really hard to be successful.
So I want to ask this question as sensitively as possible. I think that like there are a lot of founders, entrepreneurs who start off with an idea, they start building it while they have another job, and then they kind of are like, now's the transition time. Whereas like you left your job, you're like, I'm done with this, I've got this idea brewing, you spent a year kind of building on that. I'm curious like how, I don't know how to ask this sensitively, but like, was there any financial pressure to get going, get started? Or were you like, I could take my time to figure out this idea?
Yeah, I think there's always all sorts of pressure. It's like always, there's time pressure, there's certainly financial pressure, there's the
like boredom,
there's the boredom, there's the going to dinner parties with your very successful friends, being like, what are you doing still? And I think that's like really good prep for actually starting a company,
right?
And having to have sort of like that deep level of conviction at like every moment, which is sort of one of the hardest things that I found over the last 2 years. Has just been kind of the, I'm not a poker player, but it's sort of the like when you hold them, when do you fold them, and how do you develop conviction in like what the hand you have is. And I think that's been something that's been really interesting to just like explore about myself over the last 2 years.
And then you like, so you wake up, your head's still probably throbbing, you don't have your medicine, and you need a co-founder, right? You come from a like retail investment background with some knowledge of the healthcare industry, but like if you're gonna build a pharmacy, you need a pharmacist.
Definitely
right?
need a pharmacist. You need an amazing pharmacist.
Right, so Sonia, who you already knew is Eric's co-founder, explain to me the pitch succinctly. Like you walk up to her and you're like, okay, this is it.
Yeah, so I'd met Sonia 10 years ago when we reconnected 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And like basically just told her the pitch. I said, look, retail pharmacies are awful for everybody. The experience is completely broken, and we should make it better. And she just brought this amazing perspective from behind the counter and said, yes, I agree with you. And by the way, here's why and how everything works. And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, we got to do this. We just got to build this thing from scratch the way you would if you built a modern experience. And that's basically what we built.
So how long did it take you from that moment of inception to the first time that your product actually went live, like in a beta? What was the time period there?
Yeah, so we spent about 7 months before we had anybody, 7 or 8 months before we had anybody use it. And we spent that time building the team, building the brand, building the technology out, insurance contracts, regulatory permits.
And it has to be awful, to be honest. Like I always imagine, I haven't built a company, but I imagine that like the part where you're just building it must kind of suck. Like how do you sustain that without that like one financial kind of payoff of, okay, well this is working, people are spending money on it, and also just like the emotional payoff of like, I haven't been wasting my time,
It's definitely one of the hardest time periods because there's all the deadlines feel a little bit artificial. It's really hard to know when you should launch, how you should launch. And for sure, you're a little bit building in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And I think it's a hard thing to do. And I think healthcare is just like a tough space, like financial services and all these other spaces that are regulated. But definitely one of those things that you have to find other ways to just like measure progress, whether that's the team, whether that's progress against like the product roadmap, like other sort of effectively things that can like propel you forward, let you measure your progress.
Well, and like the deadlines are based on you.
The deadlines are based on you.
Which sucks. I mean, it would for me. I couldn't do it. Like I would need someone to tell me, like, you have to do this right now.
Yeah, Sonia has no...
So wait, tell me about that first transaction then. Like the first time like it was actually in a person's hands and what was that like?
It's amazing. You have this incredible rush of like somebody else is using this thing that we've all conceptualized and we've been heads down for 8 months or 9 months building it, and the first, the first transaction is this incredible feeling. And I think what's probably the moment that was, I think one of the moments that I really remember is this moment probably 6 weeks after we launched, and there was a woman. So you can use the app completely over text or chat, and it's completely private. And we had a woman who texted in probably at 9 o'clock at night and said, hey, am I allowed to take this medication when I'm pregnant? And then it was a ... You're the first person I'm telling that I'm pregnant. I haven't even told my husband yet. And it was just an amazing moment for all of us on the team, because we're kind of like, wow, like we built the right thing, and we built this experience and this brand that people trust, and it's totally private, and it's creating this level of intimacy that has never existed before in healthcare. And that was just one of those moments that tomorrow will be 1 year since we launched, and it's like, that's the moment of all of the, hundreds of, thousands of doses of medications we've delivered. That's still like the moment you really remember, like kind of 6 weeks in.
Yeah, and do you feel like that kind of moment is the kind of thing that like, I don't know, like, do you feel like there are hard times? I feel like every founder has hard times, and they're like, yeah, it's a roller coaster, but like, is that what you hold on to? Like, what is the foundation when you have those moments where you're like, oh, like...
It's definitely that. That is the perfect example of why everybody that's involved with Capsule, whether it's somebody that's on the team, whether it's our investors, it's like our partners, this is why people are involved and why we wake up every day. We have this phrase, it's like everybody needs some looking after sometimes, and it's the quintessential example of how the product and the experience and everybody on the team like looks after everybody. And those are, like, that is, when the inevitable, you have like a really rough day, or you're trying to close a candidate and they take another job, or like, whatever, all of the things that don't go as you plan. It's sort of, you're able to go back home and say, okay, great, like everybody that used this today had an amazing experience and I made their life better. And that's the thing that's like totally inspiring.
Well, and the text thing is super crazy too, because if you think about it, like, normally you'd assume that like a face-to-face interaction is about as like intimate and like trusting as you can get in most places, and that like texting a brand isn't necessarily where you'd feel like you could share things about yourself or like be in any way like intimate or trusting. Whereas compared to a brick and mortar pharmacy, in this case, it works the total opposite way, because that same customer probably wouldn't have gone into a pharmacy and been like, I'm pregnant, with 20 strangers standing behind them, face to face to another stranger.
Yeah, and the pharmacy wouldn't have been open when she had her question.
Right.
Yeah, it's completely the best of both worlds. There's a real human on the end of it. You always know there's a human responding it. They know who you are. They know what other medications you take, they know your age, but they don't know anything else about you. And so it's this right balance of, it's totally private, it's in my hand, it's accessible where and how I want it.
Right.
But it still feels really intimate, even though it's not face to face. It's sort of like removed all of the bad things about asking awkward questions to your doctor or your pharmacist because you're embarrassed, and kind of kept all of like the humanity that you want with it.
What keeps you up at night?
So many things. I think one of the things that's been really, really hard has been really figuring out like how aggressively ahead of demand do you scale a business, and how far ahead of your skis like should you get, and what's actually too far ahead of your skis and what's not far enough, and finding that right balance of how fast do you hire, how aggressively do you market the business, how fast do you build a team and raise money, and finding that right balance. And even for someone that came from an investment background that's super rational, I find that to be like the most emotional part of it, because they're just questions with no answers, and there's no way to like really figure it out. And I think that's the thing that you kind of
In your opinion, is it worse to get too far ahead, or is it worse to fall behind?
Both.
No, but seriously, like, I mean, you're saying like, oh, like, these are the things that make me worried, right? Like, if there's any budding entrepreneurs out there.
It's worse to fall behind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you raised money from Thrive.
Yeah.
How much?
We've raised $20 million in total.
That's news, by the way. I thought you were going to say, we're not commenting on that. And I was going to say, why aren't you commenting on that? So, hey, tech crunchers, 20 million. That makes sense because you built a whole pharmacy.
We built the whole pharmacy.
So, yeah,
we're
that's
in New York.
expensive.
We've got drugs. We've got a really amazing technology team that's building great products, design, the brand. Yeah.
Okay, so we're a little bit over, but I'm going to stretch. So my last question to you is around hiring, because I feel like there's a point in every founder life cycle, and I don't know, I've never built a company, but I've talked to a bunch of you, and you go from like product, right? Like really digging into that and trying to build something to delegating that same vision to other people, and your job becomes entirely about hiring and hiring the right people and maybe firing the people who didn't fit or whatever. Like what guides you as someone who is trying to build something but has to use people as like kind of those building blocks, right? Like how do you choose who to hire? What goes into that thought process?
Yeah, so one of the things that's been a real guiding principle is this idea that the best brands and the best companies and the best cultures are internally and externally aligned. And so for us, that's the promise we make to our doctors, the promise we make to our customers is the same promise that everybody on the team makes to each other, and it's the phrase that's like on the back wall and on our tote bags.
Tote bags. That's how you know it's real.
It's totally real. It's everything. It's everybody needs them looking after sometimes, and it's really people that can be successful, and people that can be successful by making other people successful. And I think those two things sort of have to come together for us, where it's not only enough that you deliver results, and it's not only enough that you're a great team player. Both you have to be able to do both together and bring other people up. Otherwise, it just sort of is like a pretty bad place.
Is the AHCA going to affect your business in any way? Like, was the model built on Obamacare, and would this make a difference to you guys?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things about Obamacare, the original ACA, was that it really kind of was like the first domino in setting a whole bunch of dominoes in motion in the private sector. And so a lot of the really important changes in shifting healthcare away from the more often you go, the longer you stay in the hospital, the more money everyone makes, towards a world where let's just focus on how healthy you are and what the outcomes are. A lot of that's been taken up by the private sector over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And so we don't see any impact on our business from any of the sort of political things in healthcare now. And we're basically seeing the private sector like continue to run with value-based healthcare.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate it. Big round of applause for Eric, guys, and Capsule.